and Kelly, because they have been working overtime on our behalf to try to figure out what is going on with the numbering, what is going on with what we have purchased in services from CABE, and sort of where we are now, and where we need to go forward. So I just want to just recognize all the work that they've done to get us to where we are this evening. And as you can see from the agenda that got sent out, and thank you for sending the follow-up, which has a breakdown of those additional recommended good practice policies, so we can talk about those. But with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kelly and to Kim. We're going to start with the Zero series.
Good evening, everyone. Just give me a moment and I'm going to get the agenda posted just so we can follow along with each other. Can everyone see the screen? Okay. So what we did is we're trying to combine the policy audit that was done in March of 2019, along with everything that we've done between March of 2019 to date, and see what we still need to do with the policy audit moving forward. So I tried to lay out the agenda along with Kim in a fashion that makes sense. So you can see here our Zero series. We currently have 4 Board of Ed policies, the 0200, 0521, and then 0523. And you can see all the way over to the right-hand side, these were the dates that those policies were adopted, anywhere between 2018 and 2019. Then if we went to our CABE audit, it then suggested things that needed to happen with these Zero series. So one of the recommendations from CABE was that we update the numbers. So for example, this Zero series was formerly numbered as 8-101. And so to be in compliance with the CABE policy numbering, we are recommending that we refer to this as a Zero series moving forward. So that would be one action that we would ask this committee to consider this evening. Kate, I don't know if you want me to stop there for discussion or keep going.
Let's see if anybody from the committee has any questions or thoughts about that. I think we should move forward with that recommendation. That seems like a no-brainer. Anyone from the committee have any thoughts about that numbering change?
The second,
sorry, Teresa?
So update to series formerly 8-101. Where is that?
So that's in, you know, Teresa, those old books that we had, the 3-ring binders, they were organized slightly differently. And so that was section 8. And all of these recommended, or all of these policies fell under the 8. That's why it had 8-. When it all went to CABE, they renumbered and became Zero series. So the 8 refers to that old 3-ring binder book.
Well, the 3-ring binder book I have has it updated already.
That may be an updated book. There's one copy of the original book and it sits in the boardroom. And that was the old numbering that when it was sent to CABE for review, those were the old numbers that they took. So there's only one copy. I think you may have one of the books that had some of the piecemeal changes in it that we're trying to unify across everybody's books now.
This is a book that was taken from online, I believe, in the beginning of the year.
Yes, Teresa.
So
yes, yes, Teresa. The book, Teresa. Hi, Teresa. I'm sorry. This is Kevin. The
Hi.
book that you have, Kara P. downloaded the policies from the Zero series up to the 9,000 series, and made copies for you in that book. And later on in the agenda, hopefully we can just kind of talk about where we are with the hard copies later on.
So we don't need to update it. It's already done.
The numbers have been updated online in our policy manual online. What Kim is referring to is how the numbers were previously. And as part of the service from CABE, they renumbered it. They renumbered our old numbers and recodified them so that they're aligned with CABE. So that anytime we make an update and they say 0523 needs to be updated, we're all speaking the same language.
Right. So we don't need to do anything update to right now. We don't need to do anything.
In terms of numbers, no.
You'll
Right,
see in a
right.
few minutes, there's one tweak we do have to make. You'll see in a sec.
The second revision is is it okay to move on?
Please.
Sure.
Is the policy number 0200, Board of Education goals. The policy was last adopted on October 24th, 2018, and is reflecting the goals from the 2018-19 school year. So we are making a recommendation to update that policy to reflect the 22-23 board goals that were already approved by the board.
22, this says 23, 24.
Or 23, 24. Sorry, I apologize. 23.
Okay.
That is accurate. And I can click on them for you. And here you will see the goals that have already been approved by the board, but we are asking that these be reflected in policy 0200. And the date that the board approved was October 25th, 2023.
One of the things that occurs to me is that you might want to, the way that this is embedded as a policy now means you're going to have to approve it every year to replace it in the policy book. So what I'm thinking you might want to do when you vote on the board goals each year, you may also take a vote to make the change in the policy book. Then you'll have it all done at once and we can just swap it out. Because the only other alternative is to refer to a regulation that you don't have to vote on. But I think if you're going to have to vote on adopting the goals anyway, you might as well just do that one tweak while you're there.
So would that be a second motion or part of the same motion, Kim?
I think it would be a second motion. So you'd move to adopt the board goals as presented. And then a second motion would be to substitute the new goals for the goals in the policy number 0200. And somehow we'll just have to remember to do that.
I think that's a good idea. Board members have any, sorry, committee members have any thoughts on that? Why we might need to take that extra step? Bridget?
I don't actually have a thought on that. I'm happy to make a motion tonight if we need it, just to move this part forward, but it does make sense to do it in one fell swoop, as Kim suggested. It's just a simple part of changing our procedure.
Okay.
That part doesn't need a motion, I don't believe.
So I will accept that motion to amend the policy 0200 to reflect the 23-24 school year goals. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Michelle. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
The next piece from the CABE audit, and I'm just going to bring it up so you can see the CABE audit on the 0 series, talked about a policy. They broke it down into numbering updates that were needed, which we formally discussed, any mandated policies that were lacking, and then recommended good practice policies. So I do want to note that in the audit policy 0521 for non-discrimination was noted, remember again, in March of 2019 that it was lacking. We have since made an update to that policy. And you will see that on May 22nd, 2019, that non-discrimination policy was put into effect. So I just wanted to bring to your attention that even though the audit refers to it as a policy that was missing, we have since made that update. So there is oh, go ahead, Kim, I'm
I was
sorry.
going to say, can you click on it? Because I was at the legislative update on Friday, and I think that there's a new category in the non-discrimination list now. Yeah, up at the top. So I'm going to just double check that. So see in the first paragraph, the list of race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation. It's getting very long now. And there is some new definition language that the legislature passed for July 1. So I think leave this as is, but I'm just going to double check and make sure that this encompasses that new category. It's a category about transgender, actually. So we may have to tweak this one more time, and probably will frequently with the frequency with which these change.
Kim, so at this point in time, we are not recommending a change, but as the new legislation has come, we might circle back to this as a policy committee if we need to insert
Yep.
Another group to be represented in this non-discrimination.
Exactly.
Any questions for Kim or before we move on from here?
So code of ethics, we're not doing anything?
This was a
We're-
non-discrimination policy.
Isn't that under 05, oh, you have here?
I don't think so, Terry. If we're following the
Oh,
agenda there.
no, she's a little
No.
bit further
Yeah.
down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a little bit further down on the new policies. I think.
Okay, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had skipped ahead, oh, sorry.
That's okay, Teresa. On the line just above that, the mandated policies lacking and just bringing to the board's attention since the audit, that non-discrimination policy 0521 has been updated and added as one of our board policies.
Can I ask a general question, please, about the adoption of these policies and how frequently you review them? Is there an expectation for what that cycle looks like? Like
Well,
how often and
yeah.
frequently we're supposed to review them?
I mean, I should think that once we get through all of this series, that you could do this once every few years, because the presumption is that as statutes change, like this one that just changed on July 1, that we'll go in, in the intervening meeting and say, gee, there's been a legislative change this year. In the policy committee, we put on, let's make this change and go ahead and tweak it. I think that the reason why this is so painstaking is because in addition to all of those things, we hadn't done an audit in a long time and we changed all the numbers. So I think that's what's making this a little bit hard. So I would think like 3 to 5 years to do an overhaul audit. But in the meantime, there's going to be constant activity as legislation changes, or as, things that might arise, like when we had COVID and we convened the policy committee to make a series of intervening policies that we needed due to the emergency. So that's a long way of saying probably 5 years would do it, but you're going to be amending them all the way through all the time.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that because obviously we have some policies that we went through in 2018, 2019. So we're on track.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and Kate, can I also offer something? Just want to add on to everything that Kim just said. I think it's important that the board is assured that we're in compliance with all of the required policies. And to Kim's point, legislation is always going to move, force us to look at our policies, update policies where appropriate. And so the non-discrimination policy, as an example, if there's recent legislation, that's going to oftentimes mean that we have to revisit some policies that may have already been approved and require us to make some updates. And then there may be some legislation that may require us to adopt a policy just as good practice. And so because of these things, there's always going to be opportunities for the board to go back and look back at their policies for updates. And that's why there's always, CAPE has recommended policies every year. But the important thing is that our required policies are in place. And that the board needs to be assured we're in good shape, unless you hear something otherwise from Kim Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks, Kate.
Okay. So next from the policy audit, and now I think, Teresa, I'm on the part that you were looking, I'm just going to highlight it on the agenda, is the recommended good practice policies. So this was from the CABE audit that said these are not legally required or mandated policies. So they're not must-haves, but they're kind of would be nice to consider. And so there was 3 different policies that they suggested that we consider. And they're all linked in here, the recommended. So the first one is Code of Ethics, and I will click on that in a moment. The next one is Commitment to Religious Neutrality. And the third one is an equity and diversity policy. And again, we have added this policy in September 2019. We did make a decision. So that's the 0523 to update and add this policy. So we're really talking about number 1 and number 2 here that are recommended good practice policies for this board to consider. So tonight, what we'd like to do is to walk through them, see if there's any questions, if there's any need for tweaking wording on them. The Code of Ethics policy is something that we feel should be considered by this group. And the second policy, we can have a conversation about whether or not adding it would make sense for us. So are there any questions before we move into the specifics of these additions? So the Code of Ethics policies, as you can see here, there's this Code of Ethics is based on standards of leadership for members of the Board of Education and is recommended by the CABE Board of Directors. So there are a series of, I believe it was 17 different recommendations for this group to consider. And again, these are all coming from CABE regarding ethics specifically focused at Board of Education members.
So have folks had a chance to look at this information in advance of the meeting here this evening? I know that it came to us today, so
I did not have an opportunity to read this through yet.
Yeah, me neither.
I mean, I got through some of the, of the items, but I didn't get this far down.
okay.
One of the things that it strikes me as I'm watching this scroll is, maybe this is a good place to have a conversation about where you guys engage in kind of the push and pull about these recommendations. Because you're going to want, I think, to have your own debate here and maybe suggest language, but you also have your peers, those who don't sit on this committee, that you're going to make a recommendation out, but you may want to leave time or invite them to a policy committee meeting. I think it just bears maybe thinking a little bit. This one, I don't know that I think is all that complicated, but when we get to some of the stickier ones, I think that's a question of kind of where you want to have, what space you want to have those conversations in.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good idea to include everyone who sits at the board table. These are very broad policies, so.
Mhm.
Do we have to pick them all, or
This is a
It's a guide.
recommendation. This is recommended policy, so we can structure it any way we want. We don't even have to use the language that they're using here necessarily if we don't want to.
You
And I
also,
think,
yep.
w-
I was just gonna
if
say
I
you-
remember correctly, we kind of passed on this at one point because part of the challenge here is that these are the Code of Ethics is kind of hard to interpret, right? Like it's not like this is not going to create enforceable action at the board level. It's really just a set of guidelines basically for the board members. I didn't mean to cut you off, Kim, sorry.
Well, the other thing I'm thinking, you could vote as a whole group to make this a policy. You also could tuck it under one of the other provisions about board activity as a regulation. It just depends, I think, on a larger conversation about, do you want these to be your governing principles for how you deal with each other and how you deal outward facing? It's the kind of conversation that typically you have in that board orientation, we now by law have to do, but we've been doing anyway. So you're right, it doesn't have to look like this. It doesn't even have to sit as a policy. It could sit elsewhere. Or if you think that this is something that is sufficiently important, you could elevate it very much to a prominent policy and engage the fuller board in a discussion about it. It's really, the world's your oyster on this.
May I ask a question?
Go ahead,
So-
Bridget.
Thank you. The city of Danbury has an adopted ethics policy. Wouldn't we automatically be covered under the ethics policy of the city? And an ethics review committee?
I don't think so. I think you're a separate entity. So I don't think that you're an individualized entity. So I don't think that you would be covered by the board, by the city policy. We are all city employees to some extent, and that's a larger conversation about kind of entities. But I don't think it would necessarily govern your behavior now.
Would it make
We-
sense to adopt the policy of the city as the policy of the Board of Ed so that we are, linked?
You
That's
certainly-
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I mean, the Board of Ed is we are agents of the state, um, not the city. So I think that's why this conversation is happening. Um, that would be an interesting idea, though. Maybe what we could do is compare what's in front of us from CABE, from their recommendation, to what the city has in its policy, and sort of, see what of that makes sense for us to bring here to the board level. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
I'm looking to just really kind of read it through before, I'm ready to, any discussion that you're, looking to have, I'm willing, to get together. But I really just want to kind of go through the 17 points. Like I'm frozen on the first 6. I'm hoping somebody will scroll down. But yeah, so whatever you think, Kate, on that. I just want to have a chance after this meeting to really go through and read them through.
So
Thank you.
Kim, in terms of like the protocol for something like this, if we wanted to bring this to a full board conversation, would we make a recommendation at this committee to do that? Or how would we?
I think you certainly could do that. The other thing you could do is you could hold your regularly scheduled policy committee meeting and invite your remainder of your colleagues to come to that committee meeting, where you can, as members of this committee, you all can kind of have the debate, and then you can recognize members who are not members of the committee to speak at the end, to comment. But that might be, because remember, if you take this to a board and have this push-pull, it's all in a regularly publicized board meeting, so it's very open. And it may or may not be the form. It may be the form you want, then, and that's another kind of decision point, inflection point for you.
What
The other
if,
thing-
sorry,
I
go
was-
ahead, Kelly.
Kate, I was just going to say, this is not something that needs immediate action or decision either, as this, remember, is just a recommended policy. It's not something that is a must-have. So there is time if this group would like to circle back to it at the next committee meeting and invite others or bring it to the full board for discussion.
I'm inclined to take your advice that this be tabled to another committee meeting and bring in invite additional board members to attend, so that there's an opportunity at the end of that meeting for them to weigh in on it. But I would like to hear from the other members of the committee to see if that aligns with what you're thinking. Bridget?
I agree, Kate, wholeheartedly. I think having everybody in the same room at the same time would make a lot more sense. But at the same time, I'd love to have a look at what other districts similar in size to us have adopted. I understand that these are all points that CABE thinks are important, and I agree each one is individually important, but I'd like to see what other people are doing as concerns their ethics policies, and I'd like to see a comparison against the city policy as well. So maybe if we have the opportunity to review this at another meeting with the full intention that maybe that's the sole item that we are discussing, we can have a little bit of a comparison in the materials that are sent to us in advance so that it furthers the discussion.
Carrie?
I agree.
With Bridget, you mean?
Yes.
Michelle or Julie, did you want to weigh in?
I agree. Sounds good. Thank you.
Me too. I think it's a good idea.
All right. So we're going to move forward and table that one for now. Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome. And
Gladys, did you have something?
Yeah, is it okay now for me to speak since all the committee members?
We've heard
have
from all the
spoken?
committee members. Yes.
Okay, I think it's a great idea. We're talking about 17 items that are listed, and I think in order for everyone to really understand those 17, and out of those 17, we might pick 5 that is irrelevant right now. Okay. And then when you get before the full board, or if you bring the suggestion from the committee, it might be totally different five ones that they want to look at. So to me, to have the full board participate in this is worth doing. Out of those 17, which one do we think is more valuable as a board member? And use that. And I go back to when Rachel used to do the policies and how we had to change over. And sometimes we had to make redo policy. This group sit down and decided if we had 10, which one of those 5 that we thought that was relevant to the board right now. And I think that's, to me, a better way of doing it, because I know that, and it's my fault, that I haven't had a chance to really look and see which one would be more important to me in the upcoming year.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. So we're looking to maybe also prioritize certain points rather
Yeah.
than just doing a blanket adoption. Yeah. Terry, did you have your hand up again?
Yes. I like what Gladys recommended. I think it cuts to the chase of deciding what we feel is what would be useful for us as opposed to the total K package.
Okay, thank you all. Kelly, did you want to continue?
Sure. There's one other recommended policy for consideration under the Zero series. This is commitment to religious neutrality, or other words, prayer in the schools. And there are 2 versions that CABE has put out to consider. So this one being version 1, and you would pick one or the other. So version 1, which is shorter and on the top half of the page, versus version 2, which is a little bit more explicit on the bottom half of the page, and essentially speaks to not imposing religious beliefs on students in the school setting, but providing time and space for students to engage in their own personal religious beliefs during the school day. So I will just allow a minute to read through, and then Kim and I can talk through some of our recommendations regarding this.
Kelly, can you make that just a little bit bigger for these old eyes, please?
Absolutely can.
We all have those eyes, Gladys.
Is that better?
Yes.
I apologize. Ms. Canetta, if you would like Kim and I to speak at all to this, let us know, or if you want to answer questions first.
I have a quick question.
Or I just want to make sure everybody has had a chance to read it real quick. Okay, go ahead, Julie.
Will this cover like, I remember that we had an issue last year regarding a carpet, which
Uh-huh.
is religious.
Yeah.
Would this cover? Would this policy will cover?
Yeah. So I think that raises a super interesting point that I think is this is your first chance to kind of explore this idea. So you can't adopt a policy that is in violation of the law, right? So it just is a void policy if you do that and it essentially drops out of your book. This policy kind of begs the question because like with the carpin, right? I remember that. It's a little bit of PTSD, but I remember that. We always have to follow the law about that. And so that means whether you've decided to affirmatively adopt this policy or not. In one of the things that Kelly and I have talked about is if this is a policy that is, near and dear to your heart and you want to make an affirmative expression of supporting this kind of speech, by all means do it. But it doesn't change the fact that if we run into a situation like we did, we still have to do what we did, which was to acknowledge and create space for that kind of religious expression, because that's the law. And so you'll see at various points in the policy, there's going to be that tension of, do you want to just reiterate? And sometimes it's dangerous when you just reiterate because sometimes you miss something. But do you want to just reiterate what already exists because it's something that's important to you and you want to make an affirmative expression about it? Or do you want to say, you know what, with this kind of a situation, if it comes up, we don't need to look and see if we have a policy because we have to follow the law.
Thank you. You
Mhm.
gave me a lot to think about this.
Yeah. I mean, you can make too many policies, right?
I know.
I mean, we're still bound by federal law, right? So I think that's
Yep.
The end all.
This was one we discussed that, and again, defer to the recommendation of the policy committee, but this is very clear in law of what schools need to do and do not need to do. So this is a policy, again, I think Kim said it best. If you want to reaffirm your beliefs here, you certainly can add this in, but it is certainly not a necessary policy as we would default to the law.
Terry.
Then why are they recommending it? They're under the same laws too. Why are they recommending it?
Because they're cave. Because they're cave.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's because they're cave. Oh my God.
Well, sometimes when these questions come forward from different districts and they're looking for clarity for things, that's CABE's position, right? They're there to try to like corral all of these kinds of questions and bring them forward and have an answer so that if it comes up for another district, they can come to CABE and say, what should we do here? So
And just to give the larger perspective, there are probably across this policy audit close to 100 good practice policies for this board to consider. So just to put it in perspective of the number of different policies that, we will walk through, not all at once, but slowly to consider, I think we need to, keep that in mind as we're making decisions on which ones we feel very strongly about need to be included and those that we feel are already covered by state law.
Right. And for everyone you have, you may need to amend.
Says the lawyer.
Thank you. So with that said, committee members, just wondering where you land on this. Terry?
If I had to choose, I like version 2 because it's a little bit more explicit.
I mean, in reflecting on what, Kim has told us about that,
I mean, if we're going to do anything, I would go version 2, but if we're not, if we don't need to, I'm on the fence on this.
you don't feel strongly one way or the other.
No, it's just articulating, like she said, it was already in the law. And if we want to put in the policy book, that's that's a choice that we got to decide.
Other committee members? Bridget?
I do think that we should have this policy, but I'm more a fan of version 1. So, I'm not terribly strong that it has to be version 1, but I think that being too explicit might be more problematic for us down the road. I'd rather have a short, concise one that we can put up on, on the district website if we need to, in a variety of different places. This is a hot button topic, and having something policy wise to fall back on so that we can make sure that our community understands where the Board of Ed sits. I think it's important. So I do think we should be adopting either version 1 or version 2 as a recommended adoption tonight and recommend for the full board. I, however, am more a fan of version 1.
Michelle or Julie?
I completely agree with Bridget. Like version 1 says, is this a public policy? I mean, people start looking for things. So if we're gonna be, I mean, all in ones, I think there's less information. I mean, the shorter information and concise is pretty good.
You, Michelle?
I really don't have too strong of an opinion right now, either way. So, if we don't have to, again, I think that was the first option, right? The recommendation. I don't know. I think I'm fine if we don't adopt this. But if, I'll go with the committee.
The other
Jim,
thing I was just gonna say, you may also think about kind of the end game. So you might devote a full board meeting among your colleagues having a conversation about this.
The only line that bothers me in 1 is this policy supersedes any other board policy that might be inconsistent with it. I don't know. I mean, it's almost like something that we don't have to necessarily adopt and then kind of supersede. I don't know. So whatever anyone else is thinking of. I'm good with going with what the board, if you want to send it to the whole board and have them look at it, I'm fine with whatever the committee decides.
I think, I kind of agree with what Bridget is saying, in that it's nice to have something in writing to be able to point to. And if I'm reading correctly, that version 1 really just basically says we're applying the law within our own districts, the way that it's interpreted at a federal level.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a certain amount of sense to use. And the reason for that is, even though I recognize, Terry, that at the bottom it's a little bit more explicit about specific activities, I think part of what we do in policy work is adopting a very general policy and then leaving it to administration to figure out how to administer that policy and what that looks like. So I'm reluctant to get into specifics of what the interpretation would look like, because I'm not an educator in the classroom or an administrator who's in charge of those classrooms. It seems like we're a little bit split on this one.
It's
and
okay. If people want the basic one, I have no problem with that. But I don't like that this policy supersedes any other board policy that might be inconsistent with it. That I think is just too broad.
I mean,
we're still gonna have to comply with the law, and if we have not, if we are inconsistent with any on policy, we should. I mean, we get covered under this line.
No, I don't like it.
Kelly, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, if there is a policy that is inconsistent with current law, which if you go with version 1, it's just reiterating the current law, it would supersede it. So I think you would be okay with removing that line if it is something that this group is not comfortable with. So you could have your policy to just read this part, of version 1, and strike out the policy supersedes. As we would be required to do that. If there is something in policy that's inconsistent with law, you have to defer to the law and update the policy.
That makes sense.
Perfect.
That makes sense.
I guess I'm looking for a motion to then adopt version 1 minus that line. That I had the same thought that you did, Kelly. Go ahead, Jerry, did you have something else?
I so move.
Okay, thank you so much. Second by Bridget. Any other discussion? Gladys, we've heard from committee members. Did you want to weigh in on this?
Well, you already accept the motion. At first, I agree with version 1. My question would come if at some point, if there had to be an addition, could we, as a board, add an addition to that to end of number 1?
For a specific circumstance or
Yes, a specific circumstances, or if something might come up, we don't know, that we will be able to go back and add it to number 1. If not, then we move on.
I mean, think like with any of our policies, like if something comes up that prompts a review of that policy, there's no reason we
Right, to
couldn't add.
maybe to pull that policy and review and see, maybe we need to, maybe I can't think of something right now because I haven't really digested the whole full thing, but I did read version 1 and version 2, and I'm more in favor of version 1.
Okay.
So
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Is there any other discussion on this before we put it to a vote? Okay, so this vote is to make a recommendation to the board for adoption of version 1 of the non-discrimination commitment to religious neutrality policy, minus that one line. So this policy supersedes any other board policy that may be inconsistent with it. We're going to strike that line. That's the motion on the table. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. All right, what are we up to next now?
Next is just a preview of what is coming up because I know there's a lot of information. So what I did here is just for series 2 is a preview of the next policy meeting. In the agenda is the 6 current 2000 series policies that are approved by the board. And then here, I'm just going to click again on the CABE recommended policy changes. The reason why we're going from the 0 series to the 2000 series is the 1000 were already updated and in compliance with the CABE audit review. So going just sequentially, give me 1 second.
Because I thought we were told to review this. That's why.
So this is just a review in preparation for the next meeting. There will be 3 good practice policies, and we will make sure to get you an agenda. I believe our next meeting is on the 15th. We'll get you an agenda well in advance so you can spend time reviewing these good practice policies right here. There are 3 that we'll be discussing whether or not we should adopt them for consideration. And so the 2000 series are all administrative policies. So that would be the next steps of this board. Or I'm sorry, of the policy committee, I should say.
So Kelly, I do know that under there's a number 5 is the code of ethics.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering how much of that might overlap with the code of ethics under the recommended good practice policies
There are
from
definitely
the previous.
There are definitely some overlap. So that is something we will, if you would like, put back on the agenda, the 0050 policy, which was the ethics we looked at tonight, and we can compare it to the other, the 2300 policy, and that might help to make some decisions on whether or not you want to adopt the good practice policy, which again, is not required, it's just recommended for consideration.
Kelly, is the code of ethics in the 2000 series, though, is about behavior of administration. The
Yes.
code of ethics in the board section is about code of ethics governing the board members. Right?
Oh,
If you-
okay.
If you
Yes.
look at the code of ethics, though, the language in that policy, Kim, does specify board members and superintendents.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I hope they don't conflict.
So I mean, and we can discuss, maybe it makes sense to go through all the 2000 series. And the reason why I'm linking the board approved policies with the dates is so that you get a general sense of the series that we're looking at, because I think it's important when you're making, adding the recommended policies or for consideration, to have context about the other similar policies that are in that series.
Not for nothing, that was 24 years ago.
Yeah, it was a long time
By the
ago.
way, on the right. I know it.
And
Wow.
Yeah.
It may be a discussion as well. Some of these, we might want to make some slight tweaks and changes to wording. You will see that the CABE, you'll see, for example, the concepts and roles in administration is appropriate as written based on CABE policy, and it does require recodification. You're going to see that consistently throughout all of ours, even though CABE has organized our website according to their codes. I know that was a question earlier. We never made a formal recommendation as a board by series to recode. Some of the new policies were coded that way, but not all the old ones. So I just think it's important we bring that up to date as we go through. But you will see that some of them, such as administrative staff organization, even though they're saying that the policy is appropriate, it's not based on the CABE model. So we may want to look at the CABE model and see if there's any consideration. The other option is you could also just bring it to the full board, being that one of the criticisms in the policy is we haven't looked at this in 24 years. So even if we're keeping things, it still makes sense today without any tweaks or changes. We may want to, re-vote on it, not just the numbering, but also on the content of the policy. So that would be discussion, which is why I think moving slowly, series by series, throughout this makes sense. And certainly if we need more than one meeting to discuss, for example, the 2000 series, we can do so.
I like the order of these because I think it's helpful when you're sort of thinking about roles and responsibilities of you as board members with that original code of ethics we just looked at. And now you're thinking about kind of roles and responsibilities of the administrators and the kind of nuts and bolts people on the ground. And so it's kind of a good way to be thinking about all those things that they talk to you about when you're a new board member and you do the trainings and the Lighthouse training, is how do those two groups kind of intersect? So I like the order of these is also, I think, good.
Carrie, go ahead.
The book I got, I assume, was from what's published online.
Mhm.
Is this indicating that we technically have not recodified it?
So CABE,
That it would,
yeah, if I could, CABE organize things according to their series by 0 series, 1000, 2000. But what they are recommending in this audit is if we haven't made an update since the CABE audit. So in this case, we have not to any of these policies, we technically have not made a motion through the board to renumber the series.
oh, okay.
So we're
Which is-
looking to do that for the 0 series this evening, correct?
That is correct. So the 0 series, I'm just going to scroll back for a minute. I apologize for the scroll. What you will see on the 0 series when we looked at the agenda, just scroll back up for a second. You had 2 policies that were adopted, the last 2 after the audit. So the 2019 policies were numbered correctly because they were adopted after the audit. We've now made a motion tonight for the 200, 0200. That was updating the board goals. So that with the vote will be renumbered. And that is why we recommended for the 0 series, the mission and belief, which has not been looked at since prior to the audit. We need to make a formal recommendation to renumber. And by series with policies that haven't been updated since the audit, that will be consistent across each series. We'll need to do that.
Oh my God. I can't believe this wasn't done.
Very simple, simple fix we can do as we go by series. If you would like to go through every series and just renumber and agree in one vote that we're renumbering the following policies by series, that's another option. We could do that. We had just said that we were going to move through by series, but it will take a motion to renumber certain policies in each series.
And
So
this is
what
for, excuse me,
Sorry.
sorry, Terry. This is a recommendation to the board that we're making, correct? Like to renumber the series.
That is correct.
Okay.
So what we have published online technically was not approved by the board, only bits and pieces.
So the actual policy, I just want to be clear, the actual policy is the policy approved by the board. The numbering system is aligned with the CABE system, which still needs the vote. So you will see here, for example, the 4 zeros policy, which is mission and belief statement. CABE, it's the policy as approved by the board in 2018. CABE aligned it with their numbering system, which would be the 0 series or 4 zeros, but it was formerly in our book as 8-101. So we are just looking to align. Nothing was posted online that was not approved by the board, but the actual organization by series was reorganized by CABE during the audit, and we do need to make those formal recommendations and updates.
I see a problem with the dates then, for if you're going to approve new numbers, technically like you have here, those old numbers. Technically, where is it? Wouldn't you have to say that it was updated now? Each policy that we're going to update as a group, we're going to have to show that it was revised in November of 2023.
So you're going to write, go ahead, Kim. Oh, you're on mute.
I think honestly, what I would do is if you make a content change, I would reflect that as the date. I look at the crosswalk and the changing of numbers as there's an old term called Scrivener's error, and we use it in contract negotiations too, when you have to renumber the paragraphs or just to clean it up. So I don't think, I wouldn't make the change, the date of the change reflect the number change. I would have the date of the change reflect the content change, if that's what you're doing, or the affirmation of the content.
Boy, oh boy, whoever handled this, I'm sorry, this is all messed up. This is,
I mean,
I'm
I
glad we're doing it. I'm glad we're doing it. But
Yes.
you're technically talking about two different books, technically.
And
That's
yes,
the old numbering and the new numbering. And what's showed, I'm glad we're doing this. That's all I can say.
I think it's needed. And what we're trying to do is really marry the old book and the new book so that when we talk about it, it's in one cohesive system that's aligned with CABE. So
Absolutely.
it did take Kim and I quite a bit of time, and I thank Kate for joining us in a lot of those conversations to kind of figure out what it was we needed to do to advance that policy audit recommendations forward. Because of COVID, it did sit for a little bit of time, but we have made a bunch of advancements. In fact, I'm proud to say that all of our mandated policies have been updated. They're no longer lacking. So we're really talking about, do we want to make smaller revisions to existing policies? And are there any good practice policies, again, not required, but might be nice, that we want to consider for addition? So that's really the as we go through the series, the work that we'll be doing.
So really what we're doing is we're double checking the crosswalk of the numbers as we go through each series.
Correct.
Now, who has the book for the old numberings? Where is that?
I believe it's in the superintendent's office. I think Kara has it. We asked that it be retained in a safe place because that's the only original.
Ooh, okay. Thank you.
Good news is by the end of this, though, we'll have went through everything, have it, you'll have your own copies, but we'll also have it posted online as well. So I think we'll be confident to say we've, systematized everything in a cohesive manner.
Right.
Did we find out what package we have with CABE?
Yes. Do you want to speak to that, Kim?
Sorry. We did get an update directly from CABE, And what they said was that we had completed paying for the audit piece of it. And there is, Kelly, remind me the number. I want to say it's like $1,700 a year or something for the monitoring and housing it
And
on their
hosting.
website. Is that right?
Yes, approximate. I can't remember, it was 17 or 1750. I can check in one second.
So we've paid for the overhaul piece, and that's what we're double checking. And there's a constant annual fee for the monitoring or like housing it on their server, basically.
Was this the package that guarantees a hard copy for each board member? Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Given that we're moving along in this work, I look forward to clearing things up so that hard copy will be as accurate as possible. I believe we still need a motion now then to make a recommendation to the board for the renumbering of what will become policy 0000, mission and belief statements, which was, I'm sorry, lost my spot here, formerly 8-101. So is there a motion to make a recommendation? Thank you, Terry. May I have a second for that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Bridget. Any discussion on that renumbering? Okay, I'll try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. So we will make that recommendation to the board for the renumbering of former policy 8-101, mission, goals, and objectives.
Yeah, Kelly, I'm thinking what might make sense is to put a Google folder that we can all share that's just got notes from each of these, because it's gonna get really tricky making sure we circle back on everything. So maybe we can set up just a Google folder. I mean, that's a public document, so just know that if we don't want to put any editorializing in there, but it might be just as simple as like, this motion's going to the board, or we got to circle back on this. Then we have a living, breathing document we can all access till the power gets shut off.
That's a great idea.
I can arrange that just with the actions that we did. I'll let you guys keep the notes as far as who made the motion and seconded, but we can keep track of where we need to circle back. I think that's a great idea, Kim.
Thank you both.
The other last question, I know we're going to look in the 2000 series next time at the three, good practice policies. But as you saw, the vast majority of the policies were adopted in 1999. So my question for this committee is, would we also like to take time to go through the existing policies as written in the 2000 series?
I think that's appropriate.
So the
24
way,
years is a long time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So what I will do is link the current approved policy that we have for the 6 policies. We'll then put the CABE recommended policy if it's not in alignment, just for our consideration. And then for the 3 good practice policies, we'll also link the CABE recommendations again for our consideration. We'll try to get that out to you guys, because I know it'll be about 9 different ones to review within the next couple of days. So that way you'll have, a large amount of time to review them prior.
Thank
I
you
feel
very
we're
much.
a little bit more in a groove now. Like, I think we kind of going through the first one has kind of helped.
I already drafted the next
You're
one.
grooving there. And next time you got to close all those tabs, because it's giving me a headache looking at all the tabs across the top of your screen.
May I ask one more question about this process? So for the 2000 series, for example, we're going to go through each of these policies, and they're, some of them are 24 years old. If we don't make adjustments to the policies, though, the adoption date remains the same. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
I mean, you can write whatever you want. We could also put a tag right under the adoption date that says reviewed and affirmed with a date. We could do
Okay.
that. That way,
I think that's helpful to have like an actual
Mhm.
something written in the book that we can refer back to.
And I think we should just be consistent, so if we're going to do that throughout each one of the series, let's just pick what system we're going to do to say, if we decide to review and affirm, then we just do that so that we remember as we go through. Because even some of the policies we reviewed tonight, while still in accordance and aligned with CABE, some of them were, are now 4 or 5 years old already. So if we want to just say reaffirm, we certainly can do that. So we can talk about
Yeah.
that.
I think that's a good idea. In terms of the ones that we discussed this evening, that being the zero series. So those policies were adopted 2018, 2019, and we are we're not actually reviewing those policies at this point, right? We're just looking at the recommended good practice policies are the ones that we looked at this evening. So eventually we will circle back around and look at those and reaffirm them, but we're not doing that this evening, just to be clear.
That is correct. That was not part of the agenda for this evening. Do you
Okay.
want to add them to next time's agenda or just move forward with the 2000 series?
I think we should move forward with the 2000 series, given the dates there. I think we have some leeway here.
Okay.
And there's nothing urgent that needs to be adjusted or reviewed, so. Okay. Any questions or concerns from committee members or from non-committee members? All right, I will look for a motion to
Hey,
adjourn then,
I did
please.
want to make
Oh,
a,
sorry,
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Wilson.
Kate, I did want to, no problem at all. I was just waiting for an opportunity to jump in. I did want to just say quickly, so I did speak with Tom about the question about the motion for the change from the old numbers to the new numbers. And Tom is recommending that we have all of the numbers in one table. And so all of the old numbers, which we can easily do, we can take all of the numbers from the audit, put those on the left-hand side. They've been converted to the new number. It's all in one place. And then we can get a motion from the board and they can all be adopted at one time. And so, I don't want to quote him incorrectly. He said it's not necessarily a legal issue, but it is kind of good practice. And, he's recommending that it is done. So he does recommend that it's done. But just for efficiency's sake, if nothing else, it's clearer a table with all of the changes and the changes that have been made, and then get a motion from the board in one move. And then this way, any other moves that take place there on out, the board has already adopted them and it's a non-issue.
Okay, so given that,
I hope everyone heard me there.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
given that feedback, and that's reiterating what you were saying before, Kim, about this, we've now made this recommendation for the relabeling, the renumbering of policy 0000. Do we want to let that one pass through and then just handle the remaining ones on a single chart? Okay.
I'm good either way. I just know it could take a couple of years for us to get to the point to go through every series.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I called him quickly and stepped off of line. So how you want to handle a zero series is certainly up to the committee. But for efficiency's sake, we can come back and put together a conversion chart so everyone can see it in one place. And so we can add the zero series afterwards, or we can pause and have them all ready for the next meeting. I just thought it was important to provide that update before we got off the line.
Thank you, and I appreciate you making that call. So the renumbering for the mission goals and objectives policy is the recommendation's been made already. In terms of putting together a chart with those conversions, when would we be able to see that happen? I understand there's going to be some work involved in that.
It is actually outlined in the, if we can just take the charts from the CABE audit and by series, every single policy, the old number and the new CABE number is listed. So we can use that information to make a motion to the board. So we can put that together for the next meeting.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you. All right. Anything else before we go?
That's it for me, Kate. No more last minute recommendations. Sorry about that.
That was a good one, so thank you. Gladys, did you have anything?
No.
Okay. All right. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn then, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Bridget. Second, Teresa.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All right. Any opposed? And we'll abstain.